There is a strange moment that happens in almost every social group. An argument begins. Voices rise. People rush to explain themselves. Someone becomes defensive. Someone else becomes louder. Everyone seems desperate to control the situation. And then there is one person who does absolutely nothing. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't justify. He doesn't rush to correct anyone. He simply sits there, still, quiet, watching. And somehow, the room begins paying attention to him more than anyone else. Why does the person speaking the least often become the person everyone remembers? Most people assume respect comes from displaying intelligence. Others believe it comes from confidence. Some think it comes from dominance. But the truth is more uncomfortable, because the people who command the deepest respect are often the people who seem least interested in commanding anything at all. And this is where the story begins. Because absolute stillness is not what most people think it is. It is not passivity. It is not weakness. And it is certainly not fear. In fact, the deeper truth is that stillness may be one of the most powerful forms of masculine strength that exists. Section 1. The hidden addiction nobody talks about. Most people are not addicted to attention. They're addicted to reaction. There's a difference. Attention can be passive. Reaction feels like power. When someone criticizes you and you immediately defend yourself, you're reacting. When a coworker questions your competence and you rush to prove them wrong, you are reacting. When an old friend makes a disrespectful comment and you spend hours thinking of the perfect response, you are reacting. Think about the last time someone said something that bothered you, the message you almost sent, the paragraph you typed, deleted, rewrote, deleted again. You wanted them to understand your side. You wanted justice. But beneath all of that was something simpler. You wanted control over their perception of you. And what makes this dangerous is that reactions create the illusion of control. You feel as though you are protecting yourself. You feel as though you are preserving your status. But something else is happening beneath the surface. Every reaction communicates dependence. Dependence on approval. Dependence on understanding. Dependence on validation. The mistake most people make is assuming respect comes from convincing others. Yet the people who are hardest to influence are often the people most respected. Think about the family member who never argues at gatherings, the manager who never needs to announce authority, the man who receives criticism and simply continues with his work. People become fascinated by them because they seem immune to a force that controls everyone else. And once people sense that immunity, everything changes. Section 2. The power vacuum. Effect. A strange psychological phenomenon appears whenever someone refuses to react. People begin revealing themselves. Imagine a colleague attempting to provoke you. Perhaps they make a sarcastic remark. Perhaps they challenge your competence in front of others. Most people immediately respond. The exchange escalates. Both parties become emotional. The audience watches the conflict. But remove one side of the equation. Suddenly the dynamic shifts. The provocateur keeps talking, keeps pushing, keeps searching, and eventually something unexpected happens. Everyone starts observing them instead of you. Their insecurity becomes visible. Their need for control becomes visible. Their emotional dependence becomes visible. The truth is not what it appears to be. Many people think silence hides information. In reality, silence often exposes information, particularly in other people. What happens next surprises almost everyone. The person seeking a reaction often begins creating one alone. And that is when observers start asking a silent question. Why is this person trying so hard? One observation changes everything. The person who remains still controls the mirror. Section 3. Why emotional control looks like status. There is an ancient reason human beings associate calmness with power. Throughout history, survival belonged to those who could think clearly under pressure. Panic spread danger. Composure reduced it. Long before modern society existed, emotional stability signaled competence. People followed those who remained clear-headed when others became overwhelmed. That instinct never disappeared. It simply evolved. Today it appears in boardrooms, relationships, friendships, families. A man enters a stressful meeting. Everyone else is anxious. Everyone else is rushing. Everyone else is speaking quickly. One individual remains calm. Immediately, people assume he knows something they do not. Whether consciously or unconsciously, composure creates an impression of hidden capability. But this is where things become deeper. Many people attempt to imitate calmness. They suppress emotion. They force a neutral expression. They pretend not to care. Yet others can feel the tension underneath. Because genuine stillness is not performed, it emerges from detachment, and detachment is not indifference. It is the quiet understanding that most situations do not require your emotional participation. That is the difference between a man who controls himself and a man who is simply holding himself back. One is free, the other is waiting to explode. People can always tell which one they are standing next to. Section 4. The silence that terrifies. Manipulators. Manipulative people rarely fear aggression. They understand aggression. They know how to provoke it. They know how to redirect it. They know how to use it. What unsettles them is uncertainty. And silence creates uncertainty. A manipulator wants information. They want emotional access. They want predictable responses. They want to know exactly which buttons work. But absolute stillness removes feedback. No anger, no panic, no desperation, no explanation, nothing. And this is where everything changes. Suddenly they are operating in darkness. The usual tools stop working. The guilt no longer lands. The insults no longer escalate. The pressure no longer creates movement. This is the part nobody talks about. Many conflicts continue only because both sides keep feeding them. Remove the fuel, the fire begins consuming itself. A former friend may become louder. A controlling partner may become more dramatic. A toxic coworker may become increasingly aggressive. Not because your silence failed, because it succeeded. And that success reveals something they were hoping to hide: dependence. Section 5. The ancient Stoic discovery. What disturbs people is not events, but their judgments about events. The idea appears simple, until life tests it. Someone insults you. The words arrive. But the suffering comes later, in the interpretation. The story. The meaning attached to those words. A man who had once been enslaved understood this better than most. He taught that freedom begins when external events stop controlling internal states. He was speaking from experience. His name was Epictetus. And his observation contained a hidden weapon. If another person's behavior controls your emotions, they possess part of your freedom. Most people never notice this exchange. They believe freedom means doing whatever they want. The Stoics saw something deeper. Freedom means retaining ownership of your mind, and this is why stillness carries such unusual power. It demonstrates ownership, ownership of attention, ownership of emotion, ownership of identity. Something even more revealing happens next. Once people realize they cannot control your state, they often begin respecting it, even if they never admit it. Section 6. The respect trap. Many men spend years chasing respect, and that pursuit quietly destroys it. Because respect cannot be hunted directly. The harder someone tries to appear important, the less important they seem. The harder someone tries to prove strength, the weaker they often appear. Look carefully at social dynamics. The loudest person in the room frequently believes he's gaining status. Yet observers often perceive insecurity. The man constantly reminding others of his achievements usually creates suspicion. The person demanding recognition often receives compliance instead of admiration. The mistake most people make is assuming respect is earned through display. But display creates doubt. Stillness creates curiosity. And curiosity is powerful. People begin wondering, why isn't he defending himself? Why isn't he reacting? Why doesn't he seem threatened? Questions generate mystery. Mystery generates attention. Attention creates influence. The test was never about impressing others. It was about becoming difficult to disturb. Section 7. The stability. Nobody announces. Here is a truth many discover too late. Emotional stability changes every relationship around it, not through force, through presence. Arguments often follow a predictable pattern. One person escalates. The other person escalates. Emotion feeds emotion. Neither side feels heard. Neither side feels understood. The conflict expands. But occasionally someone refuses the invitation, not through withdrawal, not through coldness, through presence. They listen. They remain grounded. They refuse emotional chaos. And suddenly the entire environment changes. The same dynamic appears everywhere pressure exists, with parents who expect emotional chaos and receive steadiness instead, with colleagues who anticipate defensiveness and find silence instead, with friends who test loyalty through conflict and discover it holds. People unconsciously test emotional stability. They want to know what happens when pressure arrives. The answer determines trust. There is an old question that haunted an emperor for years. What does it mean to remain unchanged by provocation? He spent much of his life attempting to answer it for himself. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and he understood something few people ever fully grasp. Character reveals itself under pressure, not comfort. The silence was never the point. Section 8. When silence changes everything. There is a moment most people never anticipate. The moment stillness stops being a strategy and becomes a lens. Because eventually you stop needing approval. Then something strange happens. You start seeing people differently. You notice who only valued you when you were easy to control. You notice who became uncomfortable when your reactions disappeared. You notice who depended on your insecurity to feel secure themselves. Think about that for a moment. Who actually won? The person who delivered the insult and walked away satisfied, or the person who refused to carry it? The answer is uncomfortable, because most people spend years mentally arguing with people who have already forgotten the conversation. The real problem appears later, not in the argument, not in the confrontation. Afterward, when nobody is watching. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. And a man who no longer needs to revisit every offense has reclaimed something priceless. His focus, his time, his life. Former friendships begin looking different. Family dynamics begin looking different. Workplace politics begin looking different. Masks become easier to recognize. And truth, however uncomfortable, is always more useful than illusion. Section 9. The final revelation. What absolute stillness really means. Most people misunderstand absolute stillness. They imagine silence, restraint, control. But those are only surface expressions. The deeper reality is far more profound. Absolute stillness is the moment you stop treating every challenge as a threat to your identity. An insult no longer threatens who you are. A rejection no longer threatens who you are. A betrayal no longer threatens who you are. A misunderstanding no longer threatens who you are, because your identity no longer depends on external agreement. This is where the story becomes deeper. Respect was never the ultimate reward. Peace was. Respect is simply what people often notice when they encounter someone who possesses that peace. The strongest men in history were not defined by how much noise they could create. They were defined by how much noise they could withstand. And perhaps that is why stillness feels so rare today. The modern world rewards reaction, outrage, performance, constant explanation, yet beneath all that noise remains an ancient truth. A man who governs himself becomes difficult for anyone else to govern. And yes, that kind of self-possession carries a certain solitude. Some relationships were built on your predictability. When that disappears, they may too. But what remains is real. That is the power hidden inside silence. That is the freedom hidden inside stillness. And that is why the Stoics spent so much of their lives mastering themselves rather than mastering others. Because in the end, the highest form of strength was never domination. It was self-command. If this message resonated with you, comment "absolute stillness" below. Not as a slogan, as a reminder of the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. And if you found value in this video, subscribe to Stoic Horology, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the most powerful lesson in a noisy world is the one delivered without raising your voice at all. See you in the next video.